Hello, everyone, and welcome to On the Couch, the podcast where we bring you intimate, thought-provoking conversations with fascinating individuals from all corners of life. I'm your host, Dr. Diamond, along with my co-hosts, and each episode will dive deep into the minds and hearts of our guests, uncovering the experiences and stories that shape their lives. From heartfelt personal journeys to groundbreaking ideas, On the Couch offers a unique space to explore it all. So, sit back, relax, and join us for a journey of discovery, connection, and inspiration. Welcome to the couch, and let's go.
Good morning, everyone. So I hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to On the Couch, where we are providing vital contents to our Black and Brown community at large. Today, we'll be talking about being a person of color in the anti-racism movement. We don't have a guest today, but we are going to have a roundtable talk with myself, Mark Lee, and also Toya when she has the opportunity to come on. We are doing double duty today, so we are working, making sure we're serving our community at the same time and also serving you all, those that are following and watching us. So we thank you very much for logging on today and even going back later on to watching the show. So as we go along and have this much needed discussion on, again, being a person of color in anti-racism movement, you're welcome to join on. If you feel like you would like to make a comment, I will share the link with you. You can come into the studio and share your comments and your thoughts. And again, we thank you so much for coming on, and let's begin our show. All right, let's see if Mark Lee is ready, because I know he's doing double duty right now at his job as well. So he should be here shortly, ready to speak with us. But in the meantime, just talking about the climate still. We are in such a tough climate right now with, the person that's sitting in the White House along with Elon Musk as well. This topic was chosen because of that reason. What we're dealing with, we also have, I guess, others that are very angry, especially the white community, feeling that we are not stepping up or helping, or the Latino community as well, that Black people are not helping. However, those of us that are not stepping up to help is because we have been in this position before. Plus, we try to let people know not to vote for this man because 2025, that agenda that they had was going to come to fruition, and it actually happened. So now we're in a climate where these things are happening. Many people are being sent back or going to sitting in these prisons right now overseas where they don't belong. A lot of them, I know the family members are afraid, they're afraid, and it's a terrible position to be in. However, he did tell you that he was going to do this and harm our communities, and this is the way to harm the communities. There is clearly racism there, and you can see that there are people that have been sent back that don't even belong there. And yet they're citizens, and they've been citizens here more than 4 years, more than 10 years. They're citizens, and they have built their selves up in their communities, around their environment, building their homes and their families, and yet they have been snatched away from the very thing that they care about, being in America, starting their lives over in America, and feeling that they can live and thrive in America. Now they're in a situation where they're not able to thrive as they want to. And that's the scary part, that a lot of people are being sent back. Family members or families are being broken apart. And then the question is, where's the Black community? Well, the Black community, again, have tried to say, don't do it. We're going to vote for Kamala. get her in office because she was offering us something. And now we're in a position where we are about to not have anything. I think recession, if we are not there, we're almost there. Recession is on the rise, and that's also scary. Our elderly is being affected when their Medicaid and Medicare is being targeted as well. When you're trying to cut all of these programs for also parents and single parents and parents that are trying to survive in their communities and their neighborhoods, and taking those programs away is also can be detrimental to those that really need these services. And with them being cut, then the services are now being taken away, and then struggle will happen. Then when you think about the jobs that are being lost, you have a lot of people that were removed from their federal jobs and government jobs that they've had many, many years. People probably might be close to retirement, but that's not the point here, that these jobs are being taken away. So, hey, Mark, I was just talking about, the climate today, because we're going to be talking about being a person of color in the anti-racism movement. Now, this is one of our roundtable talks. I enjoy doing roundtable talks because we have the opportunity to go back and forth about over some questions. So what I was talking about is the effects of not voting for Kamala.
Right.
And where we are now. And I think this is going to tie definitely into our discussion today.
Mhm.
So have you noticed, maybe on Facebook, I don't know if you're a TikTok follower, have you noticed that people are coming at the Black community right now because we're not standing up behind them?
I hadn't noticed as much of that, but I have been told about some of those conversations, and all along those lines, I've actually had a conversation yesterday with a white woman that was from a former reporter from USA Today, and she actually did a book about the whole online abuse that journalists and others have faced, and all along those lines. So it was a very fascinating conversation. She was actually of mixed heritage because I think her one of her parents was from Afghanistan, and the other, I believe, was probably European American, and all along those lines. But it was a fascinating conversation, and she just wrote a book on that the topic and everything. And she's definitely faced some attacks in that kind of way that you're talking about. So yeah, there have been attacks on people for not just not supporting Kamala, but also the whole notion of some people that are still supporting the Orange Man. Don't know why, because he keeps doing crazy things and all along those lines, but they don't understand why people are upset. And I've even seen some YouTube conversations, including ones where people were talking about the whole notion of his Christianity and everything like that, because apparently he was glaring at Franklin Graham, and some people were wondering about that action. And then he was also making some very crazy comments, and then some of his lieutenants like RFK were making crazy comments about autism and stuff like that. So there's been a lot of
Yes.
discussion around that, and some people are saying that he doesn't really exhibit that much Christian values, but he claims that he's Christian, and then he tries to make parallels between themselves and Jesus Christ himself, and all along those lines. But a lot of people are trying to figure out the non-logic of that, because he does a lot of things. That's even what came up in the podcast that I did yesterday, which was a special on my show, which is usually on Wednesdays and everything, because it was like both myself and the guest remembered this whole notion of him saying that he could grab a woman by a part of the body that is also associated with cats and everything like that.
Mhm.
And nobody really had anything to say about that. And then a good friend of mine who works at one of our local sports franchises reminded us that even on the campaign trail, he was making motions about a certain sexual act while being at a speech, and did not get that much pushback for some of these very gross and graphic acts that he was doing, and all along those lines. So a lot of people were quite upset. So it sounds like there's a serious double standard, and some people are trying to figure out that
Mhm.
whole double standard and along those lines. So yes, it's a rough time out there, and some people are wondering whether they're even ready. I know some people that have even moved. I don't know if you know this, but actually, speaking of social media, was surprised when I looked online and saw two actresses that I have a great deal of respect for. Well, one an actress, the other a model, even though she's done some acting as well. And they have chosen different routes to deal with the Trump madness. So Holly Robinson Pete, who has an autistic child, was very upset
Yes.
when I did see that
Yes.
video, and all along those lines. So it was, and she was saying that it's not a disease, it's a disorder, and she's right. There is a
Right.
distinction to be made between this and this whole notion that you're going to find a cure by the end of the year. I think he even said something as crazy as September or something like that is not even scientifically based on fact, and a lot of other things that RFK Jr. has been doing doesn't make any sense to me as well. And then the other person was Tyra Banks, and I did not realize that Tyra Banks had gotten so tired, and I think there were a couple of others, that she's actually moved out of the country. Tyra Banks now lives in Australia, and apparently she's like,
Wow.
I'm out. I'm going to go all the way to the other side of the world, and I think she took her whole family, from my understanding, and all along those lines. But it's just insane,
Wow.
some of the things that we are dealing with, and some people are trying to figure out what to do with that and how to deal with that. And I know I was going to ask both of you and Toya in this same realm. Some people are also trying to figure out if we have survival skills and if we can actually survive off the land and all along those lines. So I was actually, I get around sometimes by, oftentimes by mass transit. And when I was on the bus, there was a young white gentleman that was talking about a gentleman that I think lived in Montana, but he actually lived in a cave. And part of the reason he was living in the cave was because you have hot springs in there that you can pretty much run everything that you need, whether that's a bath or a shower or other things off of the hot
Right.
springs. So he was getting that. And then, of course, he was out there struggling. I mean, not struggling, but hunting and fishing and getting things along those lines. So he is able, this particular gentleman, to live off the land and things like that. And then there were some other examples that were given like that. And that's some people talk about living off the grid, but I don't know that we as a people are trained enough to be able to live off the grid. We know we need our conveniences and our things that are
Yeah.
out there, even though those are becoming more expensive. So I was going to ask both you and Toya at some point, do you think that y'all have the skills to be able to live off the grid? Because I was even joking that when I left to come to work and catch my ride, I happened to see that in my apartment complex there were bales of hay. I'm thinking they were doing some reseeding or some grassing, and so the bales of hay are probably for that purpose and all along those lines. But I'm going, like, I mentioned that to this same gentleman, and he was like, yeah, and if you got bales of hay, you got a place to sleep. You could do it like the horses do. You can just lay on that bales of hay. And I'm going like, yeah, you got a point. Bale of hay and a couple of a tent, you'd be all right. But I'm not trying to go down that path, at least now. But we might be forced into that path, particularly with all the crazy things going on, including the deportation of Mr. Garcia, who they're trying to paint as a gang member, even though my understanding, I know you and your husband, who is a dear friend of mine as well, are in that New Jersey, New York area. But they were trying to paint him as a member of, I think it's in MS-13, which is a notorious Latin gang, and he's never been in New York a day in his life.
Never. But yet, look at where he is. And again, I believe people were going to be swept up in it. But the other alarming part of this all is that he is considering sending our people that are locked up in prison now also to the same facility. So I think that's dangerous. I think it's inappropriate. And how dare he make such a judgment in that way that you can remove people that are Americans because they committed a crime. We have our own prisons, so there's no need to send them somewhere else. And then that also puts families out of, sorts. They're not able to visit their family members if they ended up sending them there. Also that you mentioned, Mr. Gonzalez, same thing. His families are or have to deal with the fact that he's not going to be right there present where they can go see him, which is very, very difficult for him to deal with and his family. But again, Orange Man, of course, never considered the fact that there are also going to be family members that are going to be suffering from this. And as for your question, as far as survival, I can't say that I am one of those people that can live off the land, never learned how to do that because I grew up in the city. But I wouldn't say I can't learn. I think the best thing about being a human being, but also being a Black human being, is that we adapt wherever we go. So we're not going to totally fall to the wayside and not able to reinvent ourselves or help each other to get to a place where we can survive. We've always survived. We've always made a way out of no way. I think it's important that we begin to start developing ways that we're going to have to protect ourselves.
Mhm.
And our, ancestors did this over and over again
Mhm.
through slavery, Reconstruction, and then before that, we have to think about the fact that they were human trafficked over here.
Oh yeah,
And
I mean
within
that's all slavery was human trafficking and everything like that. And April,
yes,
along those same lines, because that was the other thing the gentleman was talking about was we
hmm
oftentimes don't think about the resources that we have at our hand. I remember that when my dad, who is still living, was involved, and he's still involved in art, but was involved in kind of like reuse projects. So he would sometimes get like something that somebody might have dumped, like an old piece of wood, and turn that in and some cement blocks, and turn that into a desk. So I remember him doing that kind of reuse thing. And then when I was talking to this gentleman, he was talking about how some cedars that had been destroyed up in the mountains, I think of North Carolina or Virginia, by worms and all along those lines. They then turned those into lamps and uh, desks and other things that were in that area. So there are ways in that survival mode of our ancestors that we can go back and do reuse kind of things. But we have to
yes,
sometimes remember those skills that our ancestors had, whether it was our parents or our grandparents or even our great grandparents or others in the ancestral line. And unfortunately, when these hard times, we have to even look at some things that we didn't even think about. I think I was on a friend's podcast. It wasn't one of mine, I don't believe. And I was remembering this whole notion of there are things that are outside that we can eat that we, because of the prices of eggs and everything else going up, even though they say they're coming down and everything like that, that we can get. I don't know if you remember, but if you're from the South, like places like Virginia and stuff like that, you remember that there's a thing called poke salad, and poke salad is out in the wild and everything like that, but it can be grown and picked up almost like has like a spinach like taste and everything, but
hmm
it's out in the wild and can be a natural food and even something that is seen as a pretty flower. If I'm remembering my history correctly and everything, dandelions can be eaten and everything, but you got to know how to cook those things and how to get those things in those kind of wild spaces. So I know some people are even thinking about getting, I hate to say it, but it's the reality. Some people are thinking about getting their own chickens and their own, so they can get their own eggs
yeah,
and their own meat. And some people are
yeah,
even thinking about raising their own, maybe not pigs, because pigs can be a little bit hard to take to upkeep and everything, but they are thinking about getting things that are fairly accessible. I mean, I hate to say it because it is Easter and all along those lines, but I wouldn't be surprised if people aren't thinking about getting some bunny rabbits, but not just for the sake of the rabbit, but also the sake of eventually making rabbit as food and everything like
yes, yes,
that. That's a
yeah,
very real and hard times and everything. And I know that the bunny has a very special place in the place of people's hearts, particularly around Easter and everything like that, the Easter egg, and of course the bunny rabbit, and all along those spaces. But I'm sure people are also thinking about, hey, we might need to get some food out of these opportunities too. And some of them, like the chicken and the eggs, and even bees and other animals, are fairly easy to upkeep. I mean, you just don't want your kids, if you got kids, to get attached to them, because then they may not want to eat them or even get the product from them, like the milk if it's a goat or something like that. But I'm sure there are people that are thinking about these kind of naturalist ways.
yes. And again, like you said, I agree. I think we're being forced into these ways of survival mode.
Right.
We're being kicked into it.
Mhm.
We have no choice but to always and constantly now think about surviving these next 4 years, because we're doing this for 4 years unless he is removed out of that seat. Do we know if this man is going to be removed? We have no idea. We have not a clue if he's going to be able to get removed out of the seat. I mean, I know that people have voters remorse, because when you
Mhm.
get on there, you get to hear what people are saying about their voters remorse. But because you and I and our other co-hosts,
Mhm.
our focus is our community at
Right.
large.
Oh, no doubt.
And for our community at large, I want to say to you, this is traumatic for you all.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I do want to take it to the psychological
Mhm.
conversation of this piece, is that we have always endured trauma since the moment our ancestors got here, or even before that. When they came and embarked on their land,
Mhm.
Portuguese, the the people from Europe all together, all of them, all the Europeans, when they stepped foot on the continent of Africa and also in America, because there were Africans already here that are natives. They were here. Once they got to these two different places, they traumatized these people. They did it for two reasons: economics and slavery. Yeah.
Wow. Hey, April, but just the trauma is real, is very real, and people talk about that trauma, and some people think that we need to quote unquote get over the trauma, because I've even had some friends and acquaintances talking about, but that was then, that's not now. And there have been people that have had risen up in the ranks and have done well and everything like that, but that is not necessarily the majority. In a lot of cases, it's the exception to the rule, everything, because we still got a lot of people that are living in ghettos and what some people would call the projects, and then living in some very harsh times and all along those lines. And this was even before Trump came into office and everything like that. So the trauma is, like you said, very real and all along those lines. I think, sometimes people don't understand. And it's my understanding that that's part of the reason, because like I said, my younger brother works with at-risk youth, that some of the our young people go into crime because they don't see a couple of things. One, they're looking for a bonding community of like a family of their own and things like that. And sometimes it's also, as we're talking about, a moment of survival, because sometimes people join gangs because of the need for a family, because they may not have a strong family unit of their own. And sometimes it's also that they don't have enough goods and everything like that in their house, or enough things to survive on, whether that's money or whether that's food, that they sometimes have to take to criminal acts in order to obtain those items. And I'm not saying that that is a good thing, but I also understand the psychology behind why people do the things that they do in that sense and all along those lines. So sometimes it's a matter of survival. And even speaking of trauma, because I know that in conversations on our show with your husband, we've talked about it sometimes, and all along those lines, we also have to hold our institutions and in partial blame of what's going on as well, because sometimes the churches can add to the trauma. I'm thinking about women that stay in bad situations because they know that they are bad situations, and the church fathers and the church mothers are telling them to stay in the relationship, sometimes with the kids, but also sometimes because in their religion it is a disgrace and in some ways considered a sin to leave those relationships and all along those lines, because they're grabbing and cherry picking parts of the Bible and using those parts in order to justify things and all along those lines. So that can add to the trauma. So there is institutional trauma as well, and also the institutional trauma. And sometimes you work for some of these corporations that want to deny that some of these things are going on, because a lot of us wind up working for majority run institutions. I mean, I'm fortunate that I do work for an African American Cultural Center, but I also work for a testing company that is majority owned. And sometimes they don't understand when you want to bring up some of the race issues, or they think that you're being overly sensitive or things along those lines, or that you are not being fair in that discussion. So those have to play into the discussions as well. And yes, there are real allies that are out there, and it's good to admire them and know who they are and everything like that, and all in that line. As a matter of fact, I just had a Facebook folks. I'm going to share the Facebook post with you because it kind of plays into what we're talking about, because it was very interesting, because it plays into this whole notion, because sometimes we even stereotype ourselves as well, and that's part of what I was writing in the Facebook post that I wrote, and I did get some responses, including one from one of my network founders that were on Pod TV. But here's what I wrote. I said, do we sometimes profile in our mind, though we should not do that? If you see a grungy person on the street, do you assume he is homeless or poor? If you see a Latin person with a switchblade, a bandana, and an attitude, that he is a gang member. If you see a group of teens together, do you assume that they are up to mischief? If we got to the point where we are, as a society, are constantly making assumptions, and we all know that saying about assumptions and all along those lines. And I'm going to read you some of the responses, but let me answer this really quickly and everything like that.
Okay. All right. So while Mark is taking a second, so we're going to talk about what he just stated. So if we are to look at that about how we take on these pre-judgmental thoughts before you even talk to someone. So let's take a homeless person. If a homeless person is on the street, do we really think they want to be out on the street? I doubt that very seriously. There are different experiences this person have gone through, losses that they probably have experienced, but yet we judge. I think we judge too because this community or our in society in general, we have learned and adopted to take on the superior thought. The superior thought is the thought of judging others without even giving them the opportunity to define or talk about who they are and their experiences. To me, it's a whitewashing type of behavior because we have been judged our whole lives. A lot of us, we can't even walk in a room where some, and I'm not going to generalize, but some white people will judge you before you open your mouth. I believe at times, in even within our communities, we judge each other because we learn this type of behavior. This is a learned behavior that can be unlearned because it takes 2 minutes to walk up to a person and find out, what are you actually going through? What experiences have you embarked on where you end up being homeless? So asking that person versus judging them is the biggest part of this. And as I was saying, Mark, I think a lot of this is like whitewashing because it is a superior thought of, I'm going to judge you because this is the way you are, because that's what I know about these different communities, Black and brown communities. They're worthless. They're not about nothing. They're not going to bring anything to our communities because they're just nobodies,
Yeah.
and this ties into what you're saying. But I'm curious about the responses
Yeah, I
to
was going to
your
get to the
statement.
responses. Yeah, I was going to get to the responses. Gary Messenger, who is a musician, a white musician, but a longtime friend of mine, said, "Yeah, just think about all the assumptions people took when they stepped in the voting booth and pulled a lever for the orange Cheeto, and that was his nickname
Yep.
for Trump and everything like that." And then I responded, just like thinking the persecution would never happen to them. They came for one group. I said nothing. They came for another, and I said nothing. And I was basically paraphrasing that famous quote for when they came for me. I was basically S out of luck and everything, but it's a paraphrase of that very famous quote. And then Angie Santiago, who's a longtime friend of mine and everything, said, "I ain't seen a Latin person with a switchblade since West Side Story." And then I referred that they had, and she's from up there, y'all's area in the north and everything. I think she's originally from New York. But then I responded, had it in his back pocket, and was fairly young, looking like he was coming from work and grabbing some Modelo. And then she said, shaking my head, put down the knife, pick up a book. And then I said, agreed. So definitely she was, she's a long time activist here in the area in a lot of different spaces, everything from civil rights to housing to a number of other things, and including a lot in the Latin American community. So I might try to get Angie to come on our show at some point. But yeah, that was the primary responses that I got and everything along those lines. But yeah, folks were recognizing it and all in that space and all in that space in that kind of way. I think even Kim had a response as well, and I'm trying to see if that comment is still there or if she got rid of it. But her comment was basically that we sometimes do that. We sometimes have this notion of trying to justify the reasons that we think the things that we think, and all in that kind of way that we unfortunately do too much of, where we try to make a justify the stereotypes that we can create for people, kind of like you were saying about the homeless
Mm-hmm.
and everything like that. So we're sometimes self critique and self create these problems for our self and our community is what I'm trying to say, and everything like that. But unfortunately, we can be our worst enemies. Even sometimes I've talked on this history and everything about how sometimes we played into that racism because with some people that might have been more in the upper class or upper middle class thought that they were better and didn't necessarily try to do enough to support their brethren that were actually in the same boat that they were in, and all along those lines, and sometimes would even um, undermine some of their efforts to make it a better world, and all in that way. But it's just crazy, some of these things that go on in that way and in that way. But by the way, this is what Kimberly Holmes Calhoun, who is one of the founders of Pod TV, said. "Thank you for this. The problem is known as common social norms. So that's something that you would know as a psychologist. If it does not fit a
Mm-hmm.
person's common social norm styles, then they be on prejudice and hateful to it. I did a whole research on this subject years ago. This is how leaders divide people and convince them to hate. So that was something that she was reflecting on, and I was just saying that I was reflecting on coming from work and doing that particular evening and stopping at a convenience store that I oftentimes go to, and then she was just adding that that was a big reflection. But yes, it's something that you folks that are studies of psychology know about, which is this whole notion of the common social norm.
Yes, and it is very easy for things to be normalized, and
Mhm.
the abnormal behavior becomes supported and validated and reinforced over and over again to the point that people will become so accustomed to it that it becomes
We can set
normalized.
like right there.
That's
In
the
the
danger of normalization
right.
of what Mark is talking about and the Kimberly was talking about. So
Right.
when you normalize in such a way, things begin to formulate, which is the ideology of um, one race may be superior over the
Mhm.
other race. So what I would like to lead into, and I have this question, is that how do we define racism? How do you
Mhm.
define it? How would
I
you
mean,
do that?
there's different types of racism. There is the very blatant racism that exists when people basically they'll tell you that they don't like you because of your color or ethnicity or things like that. But that's the very blatant kind of racism. But there is something that I think people try to belittle or try to act like it doesn't
Mhm.
exist anymore, and that is institutional racism. And institutional racism is very real and all along those lines because institutional racism is kind of like when you go for a bank loan and you don't get it because of your race and where you might be living. So it sometimes can be class oriented as well and everything. But then you have a white counterpart that goes to the same bank and gets it and in that space. So you can't tell me that the bank doesn't have certain kinds of policies and things along those lines. We've even seen it to some degree in where some of the bad things, whether that's prisons or environmental hazards, are located at, because they're oftentimes located in our neighborhoods as well. So that would be a form of institutional racism because they are choosing to place them near our neighborhoods, or in some cases, right in
Right.
our neighborhoods, and all along those lines. So that's a form of institutional racism, and some people try to belittle that as if it doesn't exist. But we know that it's a very real thing. And I grew up in rural North Carolina in Warrenton, the town of Warrenton, which is actually part of the home of environmental racism. So we do know that that's another form of racism where people are impacted in their environment because of what their race is and how people are acting towards them. And so that the whole reason the environmental racism movement is said to have started in Warrenton, or at least one of the primary places that it's its home area, is because some people that were working and had a major chemical that was hazardous decided to dump it
Mhm.
in both Virginia and North Carolina, and mostly in rural minority communities. And they knew that they were targeting those communities because they were poor and they thought would not fight back as much as they did. But they did fight back. Ben Chavis, who is known as a major civil rights leader, was part of the group that helped them fight back. But they did fight back, whereas people thought they were just going to kind of roll over. But it's had some serious impacts because there are still people suffering from the health consequences of that dump. And that dump
Right.
was done in the 80s after I had come back from school. So like the late 80s. So we're talking a dump that happened less than 40 years ago, but it's still impacting people to this day because of their health concerns. And the same thing can be said with Flint, Michigan, which is a majority, has a large black population as well, and what was going on with their water. The same things can be said for a
Yes.
number of other neighborhoods that were impacted because of people choosing to do stuff because of what was going on. I mean, we can even go into the Black Wall Streets, and it wasn't just here in Durham that the federal government had a concentrated effort to go into black and poor communities and destroy those communities, even though they were prosperous, for a highway system. And I'm not saying that highways aren't vital; they are vital because that's how we have our international commerce and even our national commerce getting back and forth. But they intentionally decided to go after certain neighborhoods and everything like that. I think there have even been reports of federal people during that time to talk about them doing that because those areas were poor and or minority. So that's intentional. And that, if it's intentional, that can be a form of racism. So it's a matter of whether you're being blatant or not blatant.
That I agree. Everything you said was on the point and to the T. And I remember going to the museum down in South Carolina. So
Mhm.
just want to let everyone know that my roots or my family, they are from South Carolina, and
Mhm.
they're from the smaller towns like
Right.
Cross and Monk's Corner. Those are the smaller towns, but they are, Charleston was the hub of
Right.
where everyone came in at, and they were dispersed into these smaller
Mhm.
areas. And these set of people, they're very remarkable set of people. I learned a lot about my family members and how, they survive,
Mhm.
and what they brought with them from one generation to the next. And I can say South Carolina was one of those also brutal states. And I say that because a lot of the people that were from the Caribbean were sent there,
Mhm.
and they were bouncing them back and forth, depending on how the person may have been unruly. But because you brought up the different places where there were like Black Wall Street,
Mhm.
and I'm going to get to this part of it. I had went to a museum, my aunt and I think it's
Mhm.
the I Am Museum, because they're in
Right.
different places now. So here are some areas that were demolished based on racism.
Mhm.
So we have OC, Florida in
Mhm.
1920.
Mhm.
We had Red Summer across the United States. That was in 1919. And then we had in Tulsa, as everyone knows about Tulsa.
Mhm.
And then Springfield, Ohio, and Rosewood. Okay,
Mhm.
Rosewood was one of the other places. And Solcombe, Texas.
Mhm.
East St. Louis, Illinois. Chester, Pennsylvania. Then and also in 1917, Philadelphia. Now these are places that were demolished based on racism. And these are areas that there were surviving Black communities.
Mhm.
In 1906, Atlanta, Georgia.
Mhm.
It didn't specifically say where, but within Atlanta, there were Black people surviving and thriving.
Mhm.
Okay, so racism, especially during that period, again, we're talking about outside, this is Reconstruction that we're
Right.
sitting in now, that we're talking about. And here it is, they're destroying their community based on racism. Now, I've
Mhm.
seen, I don't know if you ever seen the movie Mark Rosewood, but
Yes.
that movie was so traumatic. Like that was a
Mhm.
lot of trauma, and it was a lot of trauma watching it. But it is blatant racism. So when people want to ignore, and I'm talking about now in 2025, and say there's no such thing as racism, no, there is. You name several different types of racism, and we
Right.
need to also talk about economic racism.
Mhm.
Okay, like you said, we can't necessarily go into a bank and get the money that we need.
Right.
Then they also pull away funding from us.
Mhm.
That's economics. Zoning areas, zoning to keep us out of certain areas. That stuff still exists.
Well,
Or
just to give an example of it still existing, there is
yes,
a major organization that existed. It's only been in existence less than, someone say less than 2 or 3 years because they just recently got their building and everything like that. But if you are a student, and I know you are a student of history and of things along those lines, the Pauli Murray Center was built recently in Durham to celebrate the legacy of Pauli Murray and everything like that. And they did get some federal grants and all along those lines, and they will pledge to maintain, because Pauli Murray was an advocate both for the LGBTQIA community as well as the African American community, and actually was the lead writer, in my understanding, of Brown versus Board of Education and everything like that, along with Thurgood Marshall, who she was, I believe, working with and everything, not working for, but working with, and all in that space. So she was a trailblazer and all along those lines. And they had a federal grant, and I want you to hear this number, $330,000 that was totally pulled. So that grant is no longer there. So they've got to figure out a way for the community and others to kind of help them come up with $330,000 that had been pledged by the federal government. But that orange person pulled that money, and then he's also been threatening the Smithsonian and all along those
Yes,
lines.
he
So
is.
that's just one of the things that they're trying to whitewash history. He said he want to make America great again. I think it's really an effort to whitewash history. And you did leave out one other, and I did mention Durham, but I just want to get to that, and then I know we're continuing the discussion. But there was also the Wilmington, which is on the beach of North Carolina, massacre and coup d'etat, because it was basically a coup d'etat of 1898. So it sounds like back then, and sometimes it can be, like I said, not just because it was a different kind of Democratic Party, but at that time, the Democratic Party decided to embark on a white supremacy campaign to try to drive populist and Republican politicians, because at that time, the Republicans were actually the good guys, out of office during the 1898 election. So the campaign used speeches, propaganda cartoons, and the threat of violence to help create support for white supremacy. This was in 1897. Does that sound familiar to you? Because that sounds like what's going on even to this day and everything.
It
And then on
does.
November 8th, 1898, New Hanover County Democrats, which is the county that Wilmington is in, used threats and intimidation to stop African Americans from voting. They tampered with the returns, and because of these tactics, Democrats swept the election. And then 2 days after the contested election, a mob of armed white men marched to the office of the Daily Record, the local African American newspaper, and set it on fire. And after the fire, there was a violent mob that took to the streets, and on the north side of town of that particular town, attacked African Americans, and an unknown number died on that particular horrendous day. And others, both white and black, were banished from the city. So basically, they took over the city after they burned down that newspaper and other things around that area and everything. So that was a horrible case of direct racism and all along those lines. And like I said, if you heard the description I just said, if I didn't say the campaign used speeches, propaganda cartoons, and the threat of violence to create support for white supremacy. If I had not said that it was 1897, could we say the same thing about the Trump administration today?
Yes, we can. I can agree with that. Hey, Toya, we're just going to clue you in on what we're talking about. I asked Mark to define racism. So this is what we're talking about, because again, our topic for today. So there were a number of things that we talked about: institutional racism, blatant racism. So it smack you right in the face. And then we were talking about examples of actual racism that happened throughout the many years outside of or during Reconstruction. So I mentioned a couple of things about when I went down to the museum, the IM Museum down in South Carolina. I was able to take a picture of sites of anti-Black mob violence between 1890s and the 1920s. Now look at the span of time we're talking about here. Yeah. And then Mark is bringing us to present day. He's saying, okay, we're still dealing with it. So what say you about the definition of racism and what you see now going on?
Well, I had stated in the past, my mother's family is from Mississippi, Prentice, Columbia. And me going there from the age of 5 and up in the summers, and just seeing how it was. We had a road, it was Route 78B. I can remember as clear as day. There was a local store that we called Progress. So we would go there. However, it's a local business, it was more expensive, but we would go into town. But when we went into town, it was a little different. They had Piggly Wiggly, Wards. There was no Walmart there. We would have to go to Columbia or Hattiesburg for those particular places. But the climate was different. I just remember my grandmother holding me close. Don't say nothing. Don't say nothing. So, they say don't say anything. And they say, can I help you, ma'am? So just talking to them. And as I got older, there was segregation. And then they migrated to New Jersey. They came to Metuchen because my grandmother's eldest daughter, my grandmother had 8 kids, came to New Jersey, Metuchen. And, Metuchen's a small, it's in the center of Edison. Then later on, my grandfather branched out because they had a 2-family and went to New Brunswick. And so that's how it started. But every summer I would go there. And it was like a time warp, as far as no cable, things like that. I would always bring tapes and things. But we basically entertained ourselves. I would walk down the road to go to my family's cousins, one after the other, where there was outhouse. One of my uncles had an outhouse. So it was a different, but when you go into town, you can see the big homes. So just to bring you a little bit further. So my uncle was a minister. So later on, he purchased a house in town. We had land, he had horses, and that was something that he did. But just seeing from years from then to now, him purchasing the home in town. But that was something, I guess, internally before he passed that he wanted to do. Despite him being a sheriff in the town and all of that, it would have been closer to his job. He actually had a doctorate. It was a member of the NAACP, but just seeing all those things. And now I actually went down there this past summer. We were in Imperial Session, if you recall. I went to see, it was a time warp where I see that they still live simple. Simple. And I think they live simple because everything is not promised. Now let's bring it to New Jersey, up here in the Northeast. What are we worried about? What are they charging us? I said, I need to go back here because it was easy to see my cousins and my family, but they know they stay their place. But it was more so our community. But when you reached out to go to town, you don't know what you're going to get when you get there. Mm-hmm. So now we take things for granted. So this year, it was 2024. For me to still the same places, it looked literally the same, the blinking lights, how we have the lights that go across, they just drop down. Yeah. But I feel that in the South, the Jim Crow South, that's what it was called, mm-hmm. It is the same. After a certain time, everything shuts down. On Sundays, you have to go to the ABC store, you get your thing, but it's still the same culture. Mm-hmm. So then I went to visit one of my cousins, they had a trailer, because they have trailer homes there, they extended it. But outside, you can see the horse stable had TVs and things they revitalized in that manner. But here in the North, what do? We're materialistic. And now we need to get back to the basics. As you know, with the tariffs that are occurring, what we're purchasing, make sure you have money in your house. Because I do recall there was someone that I knew, they were in the store during the pandemic. If you didn't have cash, the system went down. If all our money is there, what do? So I'm just going to stay down in the South. Despite what we see in the North, they're simple. Mm-hmm. They understand that these things can occur on site. If someone doesn't see you, hanging, lynchings, you may see things that happen. But I just know when I go to the South, I have to govern myself accordingly. Make sure I don't drive out that night by myself as a female. I wouldn't do that on those country roads. Because you don't know who's going to be there. Because most of them have the little racks in the back. You can see their guns in their vehicles. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I experienced as a youth. So when you say racism and the climate, right now we have someone who's our leader. Yeah. And he basically told us what he was going to do. And now we're just looking at it, what happened during his administration, the riots that occurred. So now we already know what could happen. Well, so I just know that we need to think about it and be smart. Look at your color. Look at yourself in the mirror. Don't ever think that because we are in this day and age, people are people. And now they have someone out there that what's understood don't need to be said. So I'm going to say it like that. You got to protect yourself. Make sure you have a plan. Ping your location. One thing that I know in the South that they do, they share their location. So that means that luckily in this technology, we have a device. So if I go missing, I got to tell people where I go. Right? Do we do that? Do you tell people where you're going? Mark, you're in North Carolina. Do you tell folks where you're going?
No, I mean, it's casual. So most people know where I'm here and everything like that and all along those lines. So I don't necessarily have to tell folks where I'm going. But I do know some women, including a friend of mine that is a au pair. So they generally let folks know where they are. So it is a different attitude for guys and ladies and everything, but definitely I can understand why folks would want to tell folks where they're going. And yeah, it can be dangerous definitely here in the South. And you're right, there are a lot of back roads and everything like that. But I'm pretty much stay in this area unless I'm going to see mom who lives in Rocky Mount, which is still considered somewhat of a city or a bigger town and everything, but it's not like country and everything like that. But it definitely, I can understand why people would want to be safe. But, we, like you were saying, Toya, we got people that are being very stupid in the White House. They're making crazy statements. And I was telling definitely April about that earlier when it comes to the whole notion of autism and everything like that. But now, he's trying to defend because we just had a major shooting down in Florida, and he tried to defend it by saying that guns don't shoot people, people shoot people, and some other kind of like insane things that he said in that line and all in that space. So he's basically shown us that he doesn't even care about thoughts and prayers, because he's saying some very insensitive things at a time that people are dealing with this shooting that just took place on yesterday. And all along those lines. And I understand it was the stepson of a sheriff that actually had the access to the gun. So if he's related to the sheriff, of course he's going to have access to the guns and all of that.
Right.
Most definitely.
Wow.
Everybody's licensed to carry. I love to go down south because I get to shoot. That day I shot 3 different guns. Remember the one out there with a Smith & Wesson shotgun down there? Here, they have psychological testing. I just know because I wanted to be able to carry. Someone didn't do my reference in time. And some people don't realize, even though we have legalization of marijuana, if you're a person and you would like to carry a firearm, don't do that, because I feel that's a trap. Because most people, they want to smoke recreationally, but they don't know they can't bear firearms. And as Dr. Diamond, you know, here when you have a certification or license, they ask you those things. So
they do.
So it's about money, but it's a trap.
But they got all kinds of traps. Because one of the other things I was telling you, that I ran to a acquaintance, I wouldn't call him a friend because I don't know the man from Adam, on the bus, because I sometimes get around by mass transit, actually quite often by mass transit. And this white gentleman was telling me that he loves going down in the mountains of North Carolina because he can go trout fishing, because there's some good rainbow trout in that area and all along those lines. But they also have limitations, and if you exceed that limitations, they will prosecute you. I think you can only get 5 fish and everything like that.
So who's governing that? So how do they know you have more than 5 fish?
How do they go govern that? But they do have animal, what do you call them?
Oh, man.
And stuff like that, and fishing, hunting kind of offices. But I mean, you go to like literally drive by and count the fish in the bucket and be like, you got 6 fish, and therefore I got to give you a 5. So even the gentleman was saying they got to catch you first and everything. But I'm going like, you know, if you good, you go catch you about 10 or 15 fish.
Yes. Because
that's crazy.
All of them coming, you going to rank them up.
Right, you can pull them all up at one time. That makes no sense to me.
Yes,
I know. I do have a question. I'm sorry. I do have a question that I would like to ask, and I think this is going to be a good one that we're already talking about. So, what generalizations do you think people make about your racial or ethnic group, and which are accurate, which are inaccurate, and which are most painful? So when we're generalized, so let's look at that of our racial group. So our group, all 3 of us are African American. What have we heard about our racial group, especially both men and women? But go ahead, Toya.
Loud, obnoxious.
Yeah, that's one of them. And then there's stereotypes about what we can do or can't do and everything along those lines. Because, I mean, you got the stereotype that every African American is a great dancer and a great singer. And like I said, I can't sing. My dancing is suspect, but I'll do all right in dancing and everything. But I can still hang in there. And everything. But there's also this notion that we all can cook, and like you said, that we're all loud, or we're all affiliated with gangs and all of that kind of mentality. So there's a lot of those stereotypes, so that we're all come from poor kind of backgrounds, and nothing wrong with coming from poor backgrounds, but there's a lot of those kind of like very much staunch stereotypes. But definitely there's that one about being loud, or that we don't have that if we've got a good job, we got it on the basis of not our skill and our merit, but we got it because of the race and everything. So that's a serious stereotype. People are always trying to think that if you are a doctor or lawyer, you got it because it was a quote unquote DEI hire, not realizing that there are some even good doctor and lawyer schools. I'm thinking about Meharry, and I'm thinking about Fitz, and I'm thinking about even North Carolina University in terms of in Howard, that are good in medicine and law, because the first 2 I named were more in the medicine field, whether that's Meharry and Fitz, and definitely NCCU and Howard have great law departments and everything like that. But people think that those departments are subpar and everything. So there's this notion that our stuff is subpar, even though we've got some stuff that they couldn't even survive by unless they got it from our great minds and everything like that. Because who among us doesn't have some of our white peers that on a regular basis use that microwave, and the microwave and the refrigerator, as we discussed before, came from the minds of African American men and women, and all along those lines. But they act like
look at George.
That they invented everything.
Remember George Washington Carver? I remember that was one of the first book reports that did all of that. And from there, it just heightened my mind. So whenever we had an opportunity for an elective, I would take an African American course. I went to Catholic University, all that. I always had to take my MLK studies or anything to that liking. However, one of the things that we don't talk about is in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking question. I've been looking into infrastructures, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever look at the different teams, and look at us, you'll have a senior management.
Mm-hmm.
And then what about the diversity? A lot of the places won't have someone of color. But
That's
when
right.
I look at everything else, the people who are doing the grunt work look like us.
No, it's
racial disparities and things like that, microaggressions. And what happens, I feel that just in my career, sometimes I think we don't set healthy boundaries with work.
Mm-hmm.
And from those things, I don't know what to do with that. And I just have talked to some other people, and I just been vetting that, because a lot of times we'll have a job and we'll do more for less because we're afraid to leave a position. But you know what? I have this, I have that, where some people from other cultures, and I'm thinking about the Pop-Tarts or the someone we're talking about, the kids now who are coming out. They have the internet.
Right.
Google a job. I'm in an interview. They can look. I'm worth more than that. But you're just coming out of school. How are you making more than some of us who work in these jobs?
Do you have more?
When we say something, it's an issue. Because for us, it's not a job.
Did she grab all of them? Because some of them did have hooks.
Yeah,
that we can improve upon. But I feel that it's not talked about. And I don't know what to do, because you have affirmative action, NAACP, all these folks, but I don't feel that sometimes we are not getting the appropriate representation in the workforce.
No, you're right about that.
We have going on. We have a status of people who don't have jobs. There's massive layoffs with the government. I was just talking to someone yesterday evening about a daughter who works in government. Now she has to travel to North, and she's in deep South Jersey. The other option would be go to the Philly office. So now she might leave her government job. You know how it used to be, I want this government job, I want this government job. But now that is not guaranteed. You don't know what it's going to be. Because there are folks that we've seen that there was massive layoffs. Look at the IRS, trying to get in contact with them, and some of the things that they used to do. I do taxes on the side. They used to give a bulletin of all the updates for the current year. It's not posted. So I'm working on someone's return. I go in there, it says, the mortgage points is no longer there. My client lost $1,900 in credits. That was not told to us. So when you're getting rid of jobs, everybody is like a microwave generation. Everything is so fast. We're missing the little things that we should know. And that's where, so I'm wondering, this could be for another topic, the folks that we're voting for, are they looking to make sure that we're getting the proper credits and things? So I just notice always they'll present to us, they're gonna do this, they're gonna do this, but we're keep getting more for less. We're working more and getting less. We're bringing home more or less. And I just want to say this because this is on my heart. The W-4 form, you know what that one is for your job? Your W-4. People that look like us, I've gotten some individuals who came to work. Box 2 is empty for the federal government. They owe. So now I just want to put it into the airways that check, even if you're electronic, check your paycheck to make sure that you have enough federal taxes being taken out. So we're live today. These are changes that are going, that are affecting the brown community, because we don't know anything about it. We have an HR professional that should be telling us, but now the people are doing their own W-4 form. So what's happening is people are owing. I've never had this many of my clients owe, because they're giving us more money in our check. And look who's in the office. Then remember the last time he gave us those stimulus checks. So people thought we were getting money. Then there were some individuals now that were getting the stimulus, but they took it for their tax liability. How can you give me, if I didn't do it on time, now I get my $1,400, and guess what? You don't get it because you owe us now.
Well, you know what? It's wrong, but I want I want to bring us back though
Yeah,
to
I'm sorry about that. To us,
racial stereotypes, right? And what that does to us. What it does to us in our community, I think we bought into the racial stereotypes as well. Okay. And I say that because of course, I love hip hop. I love R&B. I love a lot of things that we do, but there are different things that we actually validate the stereotypes. Speaking, okay, all of us speak very differently. It depends on the where you are in the United States. I'm not talking about other countries, just the United States. You have other racial groups, white groups, even Latino groups. You know, they target us the most. They're always going to always look at Black people. I don't care what we're doing, what we're not doing. I'm going to focus on right now the world of hip hop. Right. And I'm going to focus on what the women look like when they are on these shows. I think it does a disservice for women like us, Toya, and other professional women that are out there working hard, trying to do the things that we need to do. And this is why we can't avoid the stereotype of being aggressive, we're materialistic. You know, white people back in the day always called us Jezebel, saying that we're loose and that we're Black women that want to sleep with people. This stuff is not true. However, this small percentage seems to be the large percentage that we are pulling up and saying, no, that's not us. However, we are not treated well. So therefore, other races feel that they can speak to us any type of way, treat us any type of way because of the generalization of what is going on with the stereotypes that have been developed. And this is why we're suffering from it now.
Yeah, we're definitely suffering from it. I was just thinking that you were talking about that. There was a term that used to be very popular, I guess it was a few years before the pandemic and all along those lines, but it's still used in that space and everything, because a lot of times we get into this notion of speaking one way when we're with our fellows or our people. They can be both men and women and everything, and then speaking another way when you're in that corporate environment, or even another way when you're in their church environment. I believe the term is called code clicking, and all along those lines, right. Code switching. But a lot of us are always constantly doing that code switching. That even comes to the hip hop culture, because a lot of people will, in certain times of the day, including some of our young people, dress in whatever that stylish hip hop fashion is, and all along those lines, and then will dress totally different, but still be part of that hip hop generation when they get into that corporate environment. Because I know there was many years ago that I worked as in a more of a manual type job at the shipping and receiving office at GlaxoSmithKline. At the time, I think it might have just been Glaxo and everything like that. So I was doing a lot of the box and mail delivery and all along those lines. And it kind of comes to the point that you were saying earlier, because a lot of these corporations, I hate to say it, they wound up being almost like a plantation mindset. So a lot of the people that were filling up ARA, which was the cooking kind of end of this department, or FTS, which I believe was the janitorial, and I can't even remember what I think it was OFI, was like the office of management, and that was the mail room and the shipping and receiving. There was a significant amount of African Americans and other minorities in all of those departments, as well as in, I hate to be and coming back to stereotypes, I hate to be stereotypical, but in the secretarial pool and all along those lines. But then when it came to management, that's when it was a lot more of the stereotypical and unfair white management that was there in that position. So a lot of times these big corporations still have that plantation mindset, where we're doing a lot of the lower end jobs, us and our brown brothers and sisters, and all along those lines. And I'm sure y'all see that in the prison system, in the social work system, and definitely even in the government system. And sometimes, even to your point, Toya, I remember years ago, a friend, when I lived in rural North Carolina, and this was decades ago, I had a friend, I think he's passed on because he's probably a little bit older than my dad. If he's living, he's in his 80s or 90s and something, but he literally would be coming from Warrenton, which is an hour away from Warrenton down to Raleigh to take the job and everything. And I know some other people that were coming up from like Fayetteville to take jobs. So a lot of times people were willing to travel these great deals of distance because, like you were saying, those government jobs were the better jobs and the better paying jobs. So they would be willing to go far away from their job. I mean, from their home.
But just think about it. Your dollar is inflated because traveling. Like now, I'm lucky to be hybrid. If I have to go back to the office, people are doing the Parkway in New Jersey was supposed to be closed. They're continuing to do that. What happens now to go from 9 to 15W with no traffic is $8 and something. That's $17 a day.
Right, exactly.
In New Jersey.
Yeah. And going to New York is very expensive too. It's about $50 to $60 just to get up there.
Yes, to get, and that's what I'm saying. Because even when Henry Hayes, that was the gentleman's name, because I think David was his son, and he had maybe another son as well. But even when he was making that travel, and this would have been like the 80s or 90s, he was still spending like at that time about $20 or $30 probably going both ways and everything because of the price of gas and everything like that.
And those credits are lost. So now that back, not to piggyback, we used to get credits for jobs. If you had 2 jobs, you could claim the mileage in between. Right. I'm trying to help somebody can't find it. So I'm just trying to educate here today. On this couch, we're gonna talk about the topic, but we're gonna give you some housekeeping and things to keep yourself good. Because
we gotta have that housekeeping.
I'm a numbers person. I have turned down jobs because of that. You gotta look. Let me see how much the insurance is times 26 pay periods or times 12. Okay, how much is here? If you go, you got that title. But why are you going to go for the title? Look at what they're charging. Guaranteed parking when I work for UMG&J. Guaranteed parking union. This, that, and the third. That comes out your check. Well, this truck may not have that. But we're just going to educate our about that.
Sorry. Coming back to racism and all of those, because I know that's what April was talking about. I was just wondering y'all's thoughts around this, because there was, and we had an exhibit about it here at HATAD at one point. I think it was maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. But do you think that with all going on in this crazy world that we need to bring back the, what it used to be called the Green Book? Some people would call it the Negro Traveler's Green Book. It was a guidebook for African-American road trippers, and it was there at the time.
They don't know. Did you know I was explaining before they're taking our history. The blacks came to cultivate the land. No, we were by force. So they need to know their history, because you have to think if everybody looks mixed, it's going to change the reality. So they need a book. When someone does this, what do? You got to refrain yourself, because if you do that, you would be the person behind bars. Yes, I agree with that. Or maybe that's something that we can take on the task.
Yeah, maybe we can do that, because like I said, that was during the time of
a resource guide. Yeah,
that's basically what it was. It was a resource guide, because during that time, there was racial discrimination and poverty limited black car ownership. I mean, there's some car dealerships now that are black owned, but it was definitely limited at that time. So the emerging African American middle class, which had automobiles, knew that they were facing dangers and inconveniences. So from refusal of food and lodging to arbitrary arrest. So that's when they created this book that was basically showing you the places that you could go, whether it was a hotel or restaurant or whatever, that were safe, and that you would be all right to go into those institutions without having any threats and everything like that. Because I can tell you one of the scariest things, and I think you two women, I think I told Dean this on our show one time, April's husband, all along those lines and everything like that. I think I told him this story, but I remember one time going to West Virginia. I think I was taking some group of rap, reggae artists with me. So they all had dreads with them and everything. And I remember us stopping at a convenience store, like a gas station. And as soon as I saw what they were raffling, I knew it was time to go and everything, because the raffle prize was a shotgun, and it was in some deep south and everything like that. That was the prize.
Raffle tickets, what?
Wait, like $5-10. Yes, but that was the prize. So,
wow, I would have left too.
I told, because I think we were in West Virginia, we were doing this engagement in Ohio. I think it was Ohio University. But I looked at those folks, and I think I was managing them at the time. And I said, I don't know about y'all, but we get the heck out of Dodge right now. So
that's right. That's right. Get out of Dodge.
Because they wanted the people there. Then they came like bingo. You know how when you have older folks, it's bingo, they gonna come, but they coming for a gun in a raffle.
In a raffle.
Yeah. I do want to comment about the Green Book. I do think the Green Book is slowly coming back. And I say that because if you pay attention to social media, a lot of our Black entrepreneurs are starting to make directories. So I believe it will come back. The only differences is that we will have locations to stay other than people's homes. So it'll be like the Airbnbs that are owned by Black people, hotels that are owned by Black people. So now we'll get the chance to utilize and fund our money back within the Black community. And that is a smart thing. And this is why when you have people boohoo crying that why isn't the Black community standing up on April 5th when they did, as they did, it's none of our business, because we told you not to do it, but you went ahead and you voted the orange man in. Now you're suffering. Now you want our Black bodies to get shot up while you're able to go and do what you need to do. No, you fight for your own cause, and we're going to survive. So I agree. If the Green Book does come back, I think it's going to be much improved, and it's going to be a lot of things for us. And so people do know, other than you being Black and Hispanic or Latino X or Afro Latino, we have season in our food. We're going to be all right. I'm just saying.
Yeah, we're going to be all right. We got some seasoning in that food, and it's not going to be bland. That's for sure. Hey, I got to ask y'all too this, because I know we don't oftentimes talk about it, but it still plays into racism, and even the racism. We talk about racism in different types, and one that we didn't leave and address is health disparity racism, because it definitely is racism in the way that we're treated in that system. And I just looked at the latest COVID website, and apparently, and this has been reported on a couple of things, including on instant media, but the current COVID site actually is now a site for lab leaks, which is kind of like this whole notion that it came from a lab leak. So they done basically changed the COVID website to a conspiracy website. So it's basically, if you go there, it's got a photo of President Donald Trump walking between the words lab and leak under a White House heading. So it's basically mentioned this whole notion that Wuhan, China had been spreading it through this leak and everything like that. So that's like some serious misinformation, but that's what the new origins of the website for COVID, which is what led to the pandemic, is and everything. So I'm going like, that's just insane.
Yeah, this is crazy.
It is insane. I do want to touch on the mortality rate of Black people, and also, again, our community at large. We're talking to African Americans and the Latino community. So this is to us. We are never going to be treated the same, although they are so intrigued about the Black body. The Black body is not the same as the white body. Okay, we are Henrietta Lacks. Her cells are still being reproduced over and over and over again. Yet her children had to fight to get something from that. Okay, I don't know what they ever received. I think they received compensation by money, but in the end, their mother's cells were used. However, when you walk into these hospitals these days, if you don't have a good doctor, you will die at home. You will die in your car. Mothers, the mortality rate for Black mothers is ridiculous. And you know why? Because the stereotype of believing that we don't have or go through pain. Okay, so it's real. My mom was one of those people that died from that, right? She went in to have a child. She never came back home. And the baby did not either. So I remember her leaving out on September. In September, she went to the hospital. She came back, and we had just started school. So I know it was after Labor Day. And she came back to the house, and I'm looking at her like, why is she here? She said, well, they didn't have a bed for me. That's not an excuse, because she should be having this baby by now. Now, I didn't know all the details until I got older to read what happened to her. Okay. So as we fast forward, she slipped and fell and never regained consciousness. But that's because, one, they also kept her in the lobby for hours. And when she was able to go upstairs and get a room, she was in a lot of pain. She got out of her bed. And then during that time, my aunt said it was a strike. The nurses were striking. Therefore, no one was at hand. Then when you look at the whole thing, she was 2 weeks overdue. So already she was at a disadvantage and probably didn't believe her. And she said, hey, I'm in pain, all of those things. So we are losing Black mothers and Latino mothers to the racism. And it is racism. It is. Go ahead.
that, and thank you for sharing that. My mother was someone who had died of walking pneumonia at 24. Similar situation. Didn't get the treatment, walking pneumonia. And then unfortunately, I just lost my grandson because the mother was Rh negative and the body attacked my grandson. And so what happened is Rogam. If you're Rh negative and you have an Rh positive baby, you have to get a Rogam shot at the 4th month.
Yes, you do.
And at the last, that did not happen. And after speaking to my daughter in love, she said that the baby was the same and she had a bad pregnancy, but she was able to birth that child, but not my grandson. So this is just very fresh. And when I tell you, God doesn't make mistakes, and this is what's going on. So we just have 3 situations of lack of care depending on your insurance. And that's why you have to be well informed. And if I didn't go through it myself, I would not have not known. So now that's an advocacy piece about the community. So if you don't know what the prenatal care is, what it is if you have a certain type of insurance, they're not going to tell you. Or like this, so they don't want us to repopulate. So that's what happens. So now we're dealing with the loss. However, now I just educated her, and that's something that I will be pushing through with advocacy of prenatal maintenance. Rogam injections. So I'm going to say this now. If you need to find out what your genetic disposition is. If you are Rh negative, it's a Rh factor, which means that your body will attack a fetus. So that means that for everyone in the middle of your pregnancy, and if you have a miscarriage, you need to get that, because that means the next time you get pregnant, then your baby will in what they call it a spontaneous abortion. A spontaneous abortion, but it's due to lack of health care. So if your provider did the appropriate blood screening, then you would know your position. I'm also a carrier of sickle cell because my family's from the South. So I had to do genetic counseling to make sure that my son was not at risk. So as people of this color, get your blood. I didn't know I was a carrier till my son was born. So how does my son have that? So that confirms that my dad is my dad. Is that get your blood work. Know who you are. Educate your kids about that. So that if they go, people of color, if you carry the sickle cell trait and you date someone with the sickle cell trait, your child will possibly more than likely have sickle cell. So thank you, April, for bringing that up, because these are the things that go on for us. They don't want us to be informed. They want us to get rid of ourselves. That's what the gun violence. But when it comes to their folks, they make sure they have the good insurance, and not to keep talking about the jobs. But why are now we covering our kids to 26 years old? 6 years old, because that means certain economic groups their kids are professional students. So now, remember before you 18, you get cut off. Then it went to 21. Now it's 26. So I'm not gonna see it may turn to 28. So we don't know. But just please know your health status. Know where you are, because these are things where folks will end up in a hospital, don't know. And there was something that could have been preventable. Get your yearly health screening, and blood work should be done. If you're taking medications, you should be getting blood work every 6 months. Every 6 months, because what if you're a diabetic and your medication is not working? You can become a type 2 to become type 1 with injections. Okay? Sorry to make the health moment. I know we don't have Miss Nurse Beverly on today. But we got a little health moment. Thank you, Father.
Yes,
for that.
She's doing her community service, which I'll be doing shortly myself. Yes. But Mark, you have a question or comment?
No, I was listening to y'all, and I did have a question because you brought it up and all along those lines. But it's fascinating. I love to hear you two sisters' attitudes around this and everything. But we were talking about the racism and everything. But it's I've dated across the boundaries and dated both. Mostly sisters. I think there might have been 1 or 2 white ladies and everything like that. But I was just wondering y'all's thought on this notion that most white women are actually want the attributes of what you sisters have, whether it's the hips or whether it's the lips or whether it's the other parts of the body that are definitely the appealing parts of the sisters and all along those lines. And definitely the mind is wonderful of both of you ladies and everything. But I just wanted y'all's take on this, because I'm sure that even in your work environment, you're seeing some ladies that are of other nationalities, and particularly white nationalities, that are going to get the lip injections or the other kind of things to make their hips and all along those.
I'd say curving,
Yeah.
lysine curving.
Yeah, make themselves curvy. And I just wanted y'all's take on that, because even the exercise industry kind of like tries to make the curves that most women of African American descent have naturally the appealing version and everything like that. But I just wanted y'all's take on that, because I do know that a lot of times they will find health ways that aren't all that healthy in order to make themselves look like you sisters and everything. So I just wanted y'all's take on that.
I would love to delve into this question, and I'm actually going to make this a twofold response.
Okay.
First, with Caucasian women, I'm going to take it all the way back to France. In France, when they had Africans over there were a couple of things that they did not like about probably everything about Black women, but most of all is the shape of the Black woman. So that's when they started making those protruding type dresses where the hips were bigger. That's because Black women hips were much bigger, and also their behinds were bigger and the breast area was big as well. But that was the jealousy. The other second jealousy was the hair, because again, our hair is very versatile. We can do what we want with it. But I also believe that the stereotype that our hair doesn't grow is also a lie. Right. That's not true. First of all, the chemicals that have been made to destroy our hair is why our hair stopped growing as it should. But we know how to take care of our hair. Many of us know how to do that. And if you go by the old-fashioned way of doing things, most people hair be down their backs right now, if they did and follow what our, family members used to do back in the day. And as far as these enhancements, again, they still don't necessarily, and I'm not going to generalize all white women, but those that don't like us, they still want to be us regardless. We're the most educated at this time, and they hate that. We're now climbing the ladder and above those in entrepreneurship, so they hate that. So their thing is, and then there's the new one, the Viking braids. Okay, miss, no. I don't know if y'all did not see this young lady on Facebook, but she is trying to say that the braids came from the Vikings. No, ma'am. So since you don't understand, the braids started in Egypt, in Nubia, okay, in the Ashanti Kingdom. So, ma'am, because you don't know, I'm going to educate you. We are the first to be here, the first for civilization. We are the first birth mothers. So, therefore, you exist because we made sure you exist. And that mitochondria Eve that go all the way through all of the daughters, you're lucky you have it because we gave it to you. So, this is why you look the way you look. But you cannot own something that you never had from the beginning. You got it from us, but that is culture wise as well. And then the second part of this is I need Black women to wake up and stop poisoning their bodies by doing the enhancements. If you didn't get it, that's fine. Whatever you got, live with it. Don't change yourself, because you're killing yourself by trying to live up to these not even a stereotype. You're going by what becomes now the norm, which is abnormal to enhance your body. This is why it's poisoning you, because it's not a part of your body. Focus on you. Love yourself, because when you don't love yourself, you will do what you're doing right now. The enhancements in your buttocks, all in your cheeks, all of that stuff. Why? Most of us naturally have it. And if you don't, again, love yourself enough not to have to do that. So that's my answer, Mark. I know it was a lot, but that's my answer.
Yeah, I love it.
So I'm gonna, you had some of my answers, but I'm just gonna say this. I look at myself, we're very well versed. I just know I'm just lighter skinned. My dad didn't want to claim me at first, but that's because down the line, who my granddaddy is. But the whole thing here is that there are people that I've been around who get certain things. One of the things that I know for us, we can multitask.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we get the little darkness under our eyes. I have some people, I'm going to get Botox, but really what it is, your blood vessels are tired. So what you need to do is look into the beauty culture. I think it was Jada Pinkett who had something that she shared, her routine. So now what I have to do, I just got something to put under there. Now it's gone. Because we are multitaskers. So what that is that as you think about us, if you think about your day-to-day, we can probably do 5 tasks simultaneously. So what that means is that we develop the disposition to be able to lift and everything. And I really feel if we can wear a basket over our head and walk with water and stuff like that, that's what ended up happening. Our bone structure. So from there, this is just me, because I love science. If you think about that, now I'm in Pilates from my knees. I'm looking around the room. What I see is, all right, squeeze your glutes, squeeze your glutes. I didn't have all of that, certain things. Had certain things, lost, whatever. Now I'm noting. So then I'm looking at the girls to my right and my left. This one lady came in. You can tell she got her butt done. Now you're exercising now that you got your new booty. Because you can tell it don't look like everybody else's. So I said, okay. So now I'm looking at that. So if you did the exercise, and I'm like in over 300 classes, people think I had surgery. You get what I'm trying to say to you? But now I know there are some white women who developed the muscle. Like I think it was Ice-T's wife, Coco. They were trying to do something. I can see it happen because now I'm getting older. You know how you get older, everything starts to fall down. But one thing I can do, say, if you take care of your day and how you say you are what you eat, you can enhance all of that. There's exercises, it's muscle. But as you know, what was the Dr. Miami and all those different people, Nick Tuck. So what ended up happening was they would take little prosthetics to put in their chest and all of that to go to that extreme. Just do the exercise. Eat healthy. And then you know what? Because you don't want to be on the table to end up 6 feet under. It can't be done. I didn't believe it. I'm going to drink a 50. I didn't believe I'm exercising. People think I'm on Ozempic. No, I eat right now and I exercise. So what it is, beauty is what we are. And whomever it is the eye of the beholder. So just right now, anything that's going to risk you putting your mortality, I wouldn't do it. Love who you are. And if you have somebody that don't like who you are, then guess what? He ain't the right one for you because you got to love yourself. So thank you, Dr. Diamond, for that.
Hey, Dr. Diamond, along those same lines, since we're on the racism kick, I know you got to get out. I probably got to do some stuff as well shortly. I don't know how long we're going for and everything, but how about
5 minutes?
How about the whole thoughts around we're talking about racism, and sometimes, as I said, it can be self-inflicted racism and stereotypes. Because one of the stereotypes that exist is this whole notion that everybody is, then comes back to women and beauty too, is the stereotypical heavy-set church woman and all along those lines. So that exists in our community too, that we all come from that church environment. And I mean, we are coming up on Easter Sunday, which everybody will be dressing up in their Easter finest and all along those lines. Resurrection Sunday and everything. But folks will be dressing in their Easter bonnets and all their Easter fineries and everything. And some of those same people won't even be able to find that dress in another week or two because they only bring it out that one time and all along those lines. So that's just one of those stereotypes that some people only can bring out their Easter fineries one time of the year, and or maybe on Christmas as well, but they don't bring it out as much as they should. But I just wanted your notion of that stereotype, because that is one of the stereotypes that exists.
And what about Erykah Badu? I caught that for the show, the performance that she just did recently. Did you see the suit that she had on? I can't remember the lady that she was depicting.
Sarah Barton.
Yes,
it's Sarah. Yeah, Sarah Barty is who she was depicting. This was the Black woman that came from the Zulu, from Zulu. She's part of the Zulu tribe in South Africa. And she was seen as extraordinary because they didn't understand why her features was the way it was. Again, the ignorance of white folk back then. And they paraded her around.
Like, they had her in a carnival. I was like, wow.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. So this is why Erykah Badu did it the way she did. And I think if you didn't understand your history or know anything about Sarah, you would have no idea why she did what she did. And then, Mark, to your question, I do believe it is just a typical stereotype that Big Mama, the only time you see her is at the Easter and all of this stuff. Well, no, we are always, and we've always been the leader of style and
Right.
fashion. Always. And
Mhm.
again, once again, this is the taking what we do and know, and they take that and they throw it back at us and say, oh, this is a stereotype. This is what y'all do, and this is the only time that you do it. Again, that is also a misunderstanding of the culture of Black people, because when you don't know that, this is what you will come up with, a stereotype.
Mhm. But not only that, I had the pleasure on my other show, the show that I do every Wednesday, the online dinner party on there on Pod TV, to interview a gentleman who goes, and you can find him on the Instagram by the Chocolate Botanist. His name is Derek Haynes, but that's what he's talking about on our show, is those stereotypes. Because if you look at him, you would think that he had to have been a football player or a basketball player, because he's like 6'4" and 200 and something pounds and everything. So yeah, he's a stocky kind of gentleman, but he is also a scientist, like a known scientist, a botanist. So he studies botany with the plants and everything like that, and definitely knows agriculture and even some other science stuff that I am not even knowledgeable on, and all along those lines. But he is definitely in that space. And he was talking about how that's one of those stereotypes, is that people think that when they see him, that he's got to be a football player or a basketball player because of his height and his way he's built and everything. So they're not even thinking about the fact that he's got a great mind, and all along those lines, they're like, you got to be like a lineman or something like that, where even though he's definitely blowing up, because I think he's got something like 70,000 followers on Instagram. So he's blowing up in that social media space and everything like that. But definitely, you can, like I said, I think it's the Chocolate Botanist, when you can see who he is and all along those lines. But I'm just going like, we got to get out of these athletic stereotypes. I'm not knocking the Erykah Badu's or
Right.
the athletes that are out there, whether that's LeBron James or a number of others that are out there, but that's not the only thing we do in the world. We're not just athletes and entertainers, and for you women, they're not just sex objects. There are a lot of other things that are going on outside of that we've got to understand and encourage people to be putting those people not on a pedestal, but to give them their flowers while they're living and while they're doing the work that they're doing.
Correct.
Amen. I agree with that. So, you guys, we are getting at the end of our show here, because we do have community service to do. Mark, you have your community service. Toya, you have yours. I have to go down to mine as well. But this was a terrific show. And I say this because we do have to always talk about the harder topics and the effects that it has in our communities. And it's important that we address these things and know that these discussions people would like to ignore. We cannot ignore them any longer, because we're moving closer and closer to having to band together. And I also think it's becoming better for us that we are waking up and seeing that we have to now band together and know that we have always dealt with racism, and let's not pretend that it's not there. Other races can pretend it's not there. Let them do that. But as a Black community, let's understand what we're dealing with so we can move forward. And then, as we're doing right now on the couch, we're educating our communities and taking that information and making it vital to them. So this discussion was awesome. Thank you very much for participating. And then I'm just going to have y'all give your last words, because I just gave mine, and then we're going to end our show for the day. So Toya, I'm going to give you the floor of what would you like our audience to walk away with today?
We hit a couple things, but in summary, we are here. We are the first being. And you have to know, we can't let people shrink us. We have to educate ourselves. So if there's something that you don't know, Google it. One thing I want to think about, as far as us, we need to put money into our communities. We go to the bank now, we have to track our money, because the folks that come over here are sending their money back. So if they're taking care of their people, the Hispanic population, we need to take care of ours. Black owned. I'm going to think about the 7 principles, cooperative opportunities for that. If you're going to buy something, buy Black owned. Put the money into us. Because right now, as you know, we had certain days where we boycotted. We need to stick to the basis and to feed us. Because if all this infrastructure is done, if they take all of these government programs and stuff, what are we going to do? Purchase homes, buildings, people who have money, put money for us. Make sure that we have stable housing, stable meds. If you own something, maybe have a discount day for people can come to purchase. That's really what it is. We are in, as they say, in the end times. However, we're not there yet, but we need to prepare for that. These resources, it's our mighty dollar. Don't just not shop on that day. If you need to purchase something, help somebody who looks like us. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And Mark?
I'll keep it simple as well, as I oftentimes do, because it's part of my own duties here, even at the Hayti and all along those lines. Definitely, there's that old notion that if you don't understand your history, you're doomed to repeat it, and all along those lines. So definitely study the history, see what we're doing historically, and definitely learn from the past, and definitely even understand that there were enemies from within. So understand that even in our own communities, that we have to understand that there can be people that are not necessarily on our side, and all along those lines, that are even part of our own community. So all skin folks ain't kin folks, I believe is the old saying, and everything like that. So you got to be you got to be sure that you understand that, and all along those lines. And the other thing that I'll add to that, just really quickly to wrap up, that we didn't touch on, which is another form of racism, and it's one that I tried to be very cognizant of. And I'm not saying that other people can't appreciate our music and all along those lines, and whether it's blues, whether it's jazz, whether it's hip hop, or a number of other things. But let's be very clear, cultural appropriation is a real term, and it's a real thing. Whether it's our cultural appropriation, or actually here in North Carolina, there are a number of people that are excited about the Native American community, because I've even got some cousins that will be participating in the powwows, which are very big here in North Carolina, but throughout the country and all along those lines. But you also got people that are wanting to put names of Indians and other things on their institutions and everything, even though they don't have any connection to it. They just want the name because it's cool. And the same thing with the music. Some people are playing our music, and some are doing it in a fine fashion, and some of them are not doing it in a fine fashion, and all along those lines. So if they are going to get our music, whether it's funk, jazz, blues, or whatever, we need to support quality entertainment, and not necessarily be supporting those folks that are just doing it out of cultural appropriation because they're trying to steal our music. Like I said, on one way, they want to destroy our culture because they don't want to destroy the Smithsonian and things like that. But then they've got some young people that basically want to copycat our successful folks, and all along those lines. So be careful about that, and understand what you're dealing with if that's happening in your communities.
All right. Well, I thank you both, and I'm going to put you all back in the back of the studio. So I'll see you two in 2 weeks. All right. And those of you that are listening to us, we thank you so much for joining us on the couch today. We appreciate you and tuning in and getting some vital information from us. Being a person of color in the anti-racism movement, understand what it is, understand what that means, define what racism is for yourself, and then how to rise above it. Rising above it would mean that we need to join together and understand that we are worthy and that we can move forward as a strong, united front to make changes. Right now, we have 4 years of dealing with the person in the White House, but we're going to make it. So continue to support each other as we discussed today. And thank you again for joining us on the couch. In 2 weeks, look for the notification when we go live, and look for us on YouTube, also Instagram. And don't forget to go to your favorite streaming thread and listen to our show after. And we thank you again, and you have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful holiday. Take care of yourself and each other. Peace, love, and tranquility.
Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of On the Couch. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation and found it as enlightening and inspiring as I did. Remember, the stories and experiences we share here are just the beginning of a much larger journey. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, look for the notification on Facebook, and find us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us keep the conversation going and reach more listeners just like you. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep the dialogue alive. Peace, love, and tranquility. Take care, and we'll see you on the couch.